Well guys, it is 34 degrees and we're doing our favorite thing, setting up sheep fence. Well, as you can see behind me here, the sheep are eating the channel today, and you can probably hear the weed whacker going as Chris is clearing fence row lines. We are setting up some triangles here to start some rotation. It has been hot, it has been dry, it is only June 2nd and the grass is not coming back. So fingers crossed this cool weather that we're supposed to be getting in the next couple days actually comes, because we need it to get this grass growing. But I'm going to show you a little bit here. So this pasture here, you can see the sheep had this, or the one group of sheep had this spring for probably about a month and a half. It was all of our ewe lambs from last year that we had kept over for our breeding program. So they've eaten it down pretty good, and it needs some time to rest and regrow. It needs water. Realistically, we need some rain. It's dry and it is growing back brown, which is not great. And then over yonder is our big pasture, pasture 1. That's about an acre of really, really nice pasture, but it had gotten, I'm gonna say, past its prime. The sheep went in and ate what they wanted to eat, and basically now the ponies are in there, and they're gonna have that for most of June, I would have thought, at least, before that's going to disappear. But that's the wonderful thing really about having that secondary animal. The sheep are picky eaters. They eat what they want, and basically because we have all those beautiful apple trees out there, if they don't want to eat the rest, the apple trees are next. So we have to move them relatively quick in order to preserve that apple harvest for us, and also for them for fodder for later. We don't want them killing those trees. So the moment we see the temptation to start stripping bark, out they come. So the secondary animal going in there just saves us a lot of extra manpower having to mow that, which we'll be doing with a push mower. Maybe we'll advance to a ride-on one day, but right now the ponies are doing a really good job in there, and I'm going to show you where we're working next. So here you can see there's a whole bunch of white step stakes. This pasture over here is not being done yet for the sheep because we are doing it with permanent fencing like our other two pastures. It is a goal that we were getting it done this year, and I refuse to put temporary electric up there. It is going to have the proper page wire sheep fencing, and it is going to be able to be a pasture that they can stay in overnight, things like that, because we don't leave them on the electric netting back here at night. But what we are working on is these sections here. So we've got this bit here that comes out from that pasture. We're working in a triangle off of our little circle. So Chris has weed whacked down here for our divide fence between these two triangular pastures that we are working on. And again, as you can see, they are loaded with apple trees, so this is going to be a case of these sheep had better behave and eat what they're supposed to eat and leave our apple trees alone. But we kind of have resigned ourselves to the fact that we may end up having to protect some of these trees in the long run if we want to make the sheep use the pasture to the best of its abilities, because the ponies can only come behind and eat so much. But now that Chris has got this mowed, I'm going to start working with the best stuff in the whole entire world. I mean, this is a love-hate relationship with this temporary netting fence. We're going to take that and get it up so these sheep have a new pasture for tomorrow. Well, here we go with our textbook problem. The ends don't match up where we thought they were from last year, so we need to do some more weed whacking.
As you can see, we're done. It's a little bit later in the day, and we actually did let the sheep out here for a bit, a little bit this afternoon, and they're full and they already went back on their own because we were going to show them in here, but it just didn't happen. Anyways, I think we've talked about this before with fencing, permanent versus temporary fencing. Temporary is definitely cheaper in the short term. Permanent is definitely more expensive in the short term, but I think for us, we're kind of resigning ourselves to the fact that we're probably, as long as we have the sheep, going to use a bit of both, because there's parts of the year, and this is just where we live, there's times of the year where we really can't use the temporary fencing, and if we can't use the temporary fencing, then we can't have the animals out on the pasture, and if we can't have the animals out on the pasture, then we have to feed them. So having some pastures permanently fenced is definitely a plus, and the plan is, as it's been for the last 3 years, to fence this full 6 acres or 6.5 acres or whatever it is permanently, and then kind of go from there. But we're realistically, just because of time, we are going to do it in chunks. So we have 2 chunks in our channel fenced well. We have another one where all we have to do is put the fence up and put in a couple more posts, so we're very, very close. And realistically, the 2 that are kind of on either side of me here are probably going to be temporary for this year. But the plus side to that is, because we have this channel cut, we think we may only need 1 more roll of the temporary fencing to actually set these 2 pastures up sort of semi-permanently, i.e. for the grazing season, or at least until fall, where all we'll really have to do is move the fence. Because that's one thing last year as we expanded our pasture use, it's really difficult to keep pushing ahead, where every time you go to set this temporary fence up, you have to figure out new fence lines. The plus today, even though it was really hot, was, aside from that little hiccup, we knew exactly where they were going, and that made it a lot easier. So definitely something to think about too. Now, we are not on a property that's just a nice big square and everything we do is weird shapes, and that makes it more difficult. But anyways, it's just more thoughts on pasture. So right now, if I kind of pan around everything slowly while I'm talking, there's a lot of nice green biomass. But as Stephanie sort of said at the beginning of the video, when we were talking about pasture 1, this is the time of year where everything, at least where we live, is deceiving, because it looks like our carrying capacity of what we could support out here is huge. And realistically, you could have a lot more animals out here at this point in time. But in a month, when we get into July, that won't be the case. And so this is where it's a really delicate balance between keeping the grass and the forage growing at a level that the animals actually want to consume, but also not overextending yourself at any given time on your carrying capacity, because that's not a fun situation to be in, to have to get rid of animals or purchase feed to feed them. But that brings us to another little bit of discussion.
So currently we are running 18 adult sheep and 13 babies on our pastures. So we have 31 sheep in total, because those babies are getting big fast. It's a constant discussion on how to revamp our homestead to make things run smoother and so on. And the one thing that we're finding is we do have the carrying capacity for that number of sheep without too much problem. Our problem is having it set up. And that is one thing I would definitely recommend, is, as Chris has talked about numerous times, about carrying capacity and making sure you don't get more than you can handle at the beginning. That is something that we're finding now. And the discussion is maybe we should slide it back a little bit for another year or 2 and maybe go to a few less breeding sheep, as much as that pains me to say it, no. And make this, what we have fenced, work a little bit better for a carrying capacity number. And then that way we can get the job done and hopefully expand at that point again. That's the one beautiful thing about sheep, is they usually have quite a few babies, and it's really, it's very much like chicken math, in the sense that the sheep math works the same way. The numbers creep up really quick, and it gets really hard sometimes to pick and choose who stays and who goes.
But anyways, this job's done. We've got another day of cutting to actually get this pasture, so we have a similar sort of fence channel that we can put a fence up in. But hopefully, once we do that, the rest of the summer will actually run fairly well.